Hello. So today we will be dealing with the development of genitourinary tract. So first part of this tract development I have already spoken. You can see the lecture which I have uploaded before. So this in the part 2 we are going to see following aspects of the development. Like here we are going to see the development of testes, ovaries, uterus, vagina, and the genitalia, the male as well as the female. So the basic structure here is that the genital system development, we are going to see how the gonads are developing and the formation of those ducts to this connecting these gonads and the development of external genitalia. Taking you back to the development of urogenital ridge happened in the dorsal wall of the developing fetus. So medial to that happens the genital ridge, and from this genital ridge happens to be a developing gonads. So between the male gonads and the female gonads. The germinal cells, or you can say the germ cells, which is also called as primordial germ cells, they do not develop from the genital, but these germ cells, they will be present, will be differentiating from the wall of the yolk sac. They will be present near to the point of the allantoid diverticulum around the third week. Later on, they migrate from this position. And this you can see in this photograph where the cells they have been differentiating from the wall of this yolk sac. As the gut tube is formed, they will be start migrating from here. They will reach the dorsal mesogastrium and come to the point where the genital ridge is. You can see this section where the genital is shown on either side. And this is that urogenital ridge which has contributed into the kidneys. So this genital ridge which is present on the medial side of those urogenital ridge, to this point the germ cells has been started migrating. So right from the third week where it has been started differentiating, it reaches here at around fifth week where they get incorporated within the cells of the genital ridge. Now this genital ridge, what I said, it happens to be on the medial side of the urogenital ridge. But where exactly? Not the complete extent, but the middle to fourth of the genital ridge. Middle to fourth of the urogenital ridge. So what this genital ridge happens to be a undifferentiated one. It's indifferentiated, so it could be either developing into testes or into the ovaries. What decides it to develop into testes or ovaries? It's the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome has the gene called as SRY gene, which stimulates the cells in this genital ridge to produce Sertoli cells as well as Leydig cells. This Sertoli cells, you can see here, this Sertoli cells, it secretes anti-Mullerian hormone. It means the hormone which acts against those Mullerian ducts, which means the paramesonephric ducts. They're also called as Mullerian ducts. It acts against this and inhibits the female reproductive tract development. Simultaneously, it also stimulates Leydig cells, which secretes testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, which help in the development of the male genital system. So let us see what happens next. As the SRY gene is stimulating this genital ridge, which is shown here. So this is the complete urogenital ridge, and this medial part is the genital ridge itself. And we have seen before that in this urogenital ridge, the mesonephros has been forming a mesonephric duct, right? Mesonephric duct and the tubule systems. And even the paramesonephric duct forms in this. Now we will be speaking on this part, basically, where the gonads are developing. So now we are speaking about the testes. So here you will find that the gene, what I said, SRY gene, it stimulates this region to block, like there happens the coelomic epithelium undergoes the changes to produces to multiply to form the sex cords. You can see the multiple cords has been developed. So those are the sex cords. They start proliferating and they start separating from the surface epithelium. And this further sex cord formation happens in the medulla of this genital ridge. The focus here that I said that the sex cords which are there, they will be formed in the medulla of the genital ridge. Just opposite to this, what happens in the female genital ridge, where the changes happens in the cortex position at the ridge. Now here, because of this SRY gene, the sex cords they start separating. This is around seventh week. If histologically, seventh week we can differentiate the genital ridge as being developing into testis or the ovaries. How, like, we find the mesenchyme being separating the sex cords from the surface epithelium. And that mesenchyme will form the tunica albuminea or the covering of the testis. While the sex cord, which is being separated, will now looks like this. You can see the sex cords, they have been separated from the surface, and the mesenchyme has started appearing between this to form the tunica albuginea. While the sex cord, which has been separated, gets intermingled inside the germ cells. They catch the germ cells within them here, and the sex cords will form the seminiferous tubules. So, what the seminiferous tubule has? It has the cells like Leydig cells and the differentiating cells called as spermatogonia, which will be there inside, right? While these six cord cells, they form a network like cells here called as reticords, which will then form a rete testis. So in this next photograph, you can see the sex cord has been differentiated into seminiferous tubules, while the reticords has been forming rete testis. So that is the fate of this sex cords. Simultaneously, some changes are happening in the mesonephric ducts and the tubules which are there in the vicinity. So the mesonephric tubules which are there in the vicinity here, you can see this tubule will be forming later on the efferent ductules. Here you can see. In my previous lecture, I said what happens to the mesonephric duct system. The generally caudal end it gives the ureteric bud formation. But what happens to the rest of the mesonephric duct, which is already present? So that duct will contribute into male reproductive tract. Already I have explained you that the same tract, which is the same tubules and the tract which is represented here, it forms this tubule, it forms this efferent ductules, while the remaining part of mesonephric duct will form duct of epididymis, vas deferens, ejaculatory duct, which will be seeing opening into the genital sinus. So that will be fate of this mesonephric duct and the genital ridge in the male. So this testis which is formed is in the lumbar region now, not like the kidney which was in the pelvic region which ascends. Kidney ascends. Now here the testis is in the lumbar region of the dorsal abdominal wall. It gradually descends into the scrotum, first into the iliac fossa around 3 months, and it reaches to the deep inguinal fluid up to around 7 months, while it reaches in the scrotum by around 8 months, 8 to 9 months. What is the factor responsible for the descent of the testis? Factors responsible are initially the differential growth which happens in the anti-abdominal wall, simultaneously the peritoneal pouch which is protruding inside, leading to the formation of this inguinal bursa. So it produces a tract for the testis to descend, forming the inguinal canal. And as there is increase in the pressure, along with the gubernaculum, which acts as a guiding force to draw the testis into the scrotum. Even there is the change in the abdominal temperature. Abdominal temperature is higher as compared to scrotal. So the scrotal is favorable for the growth of the happening of spermatogenesis. And even the uncurving of the fetal curve. Uncurving will lead into the descent of the testis. Now let us see how the development of ovary happens. Before, in the testes, we have noted that in the genital ridge, in the middle, the sex cords they differentiate. And what was the switch factor for the genital ridge to decide where the sex cord should happen? It was a Y gene. So now, in the absence of Y chromosome, in the absence of RY gene, the factor which was responsible for the testis development is not available. So the coelomic epithelium of genital ridge now differentiate in the cortex of the genital ridge to form the sex cords. Now this sex cords here, which is formed in the cortex, it's get fragmented into multiple cords and gets incorporated in germ cells. So here you can see the multiple follicles are formed. These are the primordial follicles with the enclosed inside the oogonia inside, primary oocyte. So from the sex cords, this primordial follicle is formed and the rete ovarian cords, which is present here, it gets degenerated. Likewise, the mesonephric tubules which were there, which was forming efferent tubes and the male reproductive tract, also gets degenerated. Then what will be carrying this ovarian follicles? Obviously, the fallopian tube. It has to be formed from the another form of a duct system called as paramesonephric duct. Now, paramesonephric duct comes in the role. What has happened to the paramesonephric duct in the male? The SRY gene, which was secreting anti-Mullerian hormone, that is a hormone against paramesonephric duct, has degenerated the paramesonephric duct. But here it persists and it will lead into the female reproductive tract. That we will be speaking subsequently. Now, these genital ridges, they are in the middle to fourth of the urogenital region. So they are held or they are hanging by a few folds. The fold which is hanging cranially will be called as suspensory, and the fold which is carrying downwards will be called as gubernaculum ligament. So this gubernaculum ligament in females, they will be named as round ligament of uterus and the ligament of ovary. That will be seen subsequently. Now let us see how the uterus and the fallopian tubes are formed. As I said, the female reproductive tract is formed from paramesonephric duct. Two paramesonephric duct, they fuse together caudally, and which is shown in this photograph. Cranial end is free, while the caudal end fuse together to form one canal. So this will be called as a uterovaginal canal, and equally they are separated by some septum because of the fusion of these two tubes, which gets degenerated later on, forming a canal inside. As they are approaching towards the urogenital sinus, we have noted paramesonephric duct was opening into the cloaca and the primitive urogenital sinus. The paramesonephric duct approaches towards the definitive of the phallic part of this urogenital sinus, where the they proliferate. The cells from those urogenital sinus they proliferate as they are approaching, and even the cells from this uterovaginal canal together proliferate to form a plate called as vaginal plate or sino-vaginal bulb. It's a bulb between sinuses and the vaginal canal, so called as sino-vaginal bulb. Later on, it gets cannulated to form a definitive vagina, fornix, and the vagina of the hymen. So the fusion of this paramesal duct fused area will contribute in the uterus and the cervix, and the sino-vaginal bulb will contribute into this vagina, and they will go into the vestibule. So that's the fate of the paramesonephric duct in a female. In male, they will be regenerating but forming a small part as a remnant called as appendix of the testis and the prostatic utricles. In a female, what we have noted, it is forming uterine tube, uterus and the part of the vagina. So this photograph shows you how the paramesonephric duct has fused and has contributed into uterus, cervix and the vagina, while in males, that will be, you can see, focus on this orange color structure forming prostatic utricle and the appendix of the testis, paramesonephric duct. The rest of the paramesonephric duct have been degenerated. What is this blue one? That's the mesonephric duct. Now let us have again look over the mesonephric duct in total. It's how it is, what structures it is deriving. So in the male, it is deriving epididymis. You can see here it's forming the different ductules, duct of epididymis, forming vas deferens, forming ejaculatory duct as well as seminal vesicles. Apart from that, it will be forming ureteric bud derivatives that we have already seen. They form a collecting part of the kidney, and adsorbed part of mesonephric duct into the bladder will form a trigone of the bladder and the prostatic part of the urethra. While in the female, that will be forming apoophoron and paraophoron. This will be para and this will be apoophoron around the ovaries. This green colored one, blue colored one, which is shown here, that's the mesonephric duct, and which is the remnant left is in the females. While this red color one is the paramesonephric duct, which is forming the fallopian tube and uterus, cervix, and vagina. That's all about the development of gonads and the duct system. Now let us see how what changes are happening in the genitalia and where are these happening. The genitalia is differentiated into male and the female. The factors again responsible for is the SRY gene, which has stimulated Sertoli cells and the Leydig cells. And the Leydig cell secretes testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, which brings about the differentiation of male gonads, male genitalia. So let us see how what happens initially. Now, in the region of the cloacal membrane, we have seen that by the fusion of urorectal septum, the two membranes were differentiated, urogenital membrane and the anal membrane. So, in the region of urogenital membrane, on the sides, the two folds appear, and they are called as primitive urethral fold. So you can see here these two folds. They are called as primitive urethral folds. Next to that appears a large swelling called as genital swelling, and the point of fusion cranially called as a tubercle, called as genital tubercle. So these are the three major swellings which are happening. Will be contributing into the genitalia. First swelling is the primitive urethral folds on the sides, the genital swellings on the sides again, and the tubercle in the midline here. As this grow longitudinally, the fusion happens in the male. So when this is happening, the genital tubercle initially grows to form the phallus. So in the male, this will progress further to form this. So this will form the phallus initially, and simultaneously the groove which is there, the groove, or I would say the fold which is there on the sides, it starts fusing. It fuses and form a definitive penis. And when it is fusing, it starts, initially you find there is a urethral plate in between and groove appears, and then the fusion happens in the urethral folds, will leading into the formation of lumen inside the urethra. So the penile urethra is formed inside. But in the region of glands. There is a, urethra. You may not see any extension of the urethra right here, but the cell it ingresses inside ectodermal cells, ingresses inside to form the cord of the cells inside, and then it gets cannulated and then extended throughout to form the urethra in total. You will find there will be navicular opening here and then continuing as the urethral opening. So the urethral fold in the males has been fused to form a midline raphe, penile raphe here. If there is a non-fusion of this, there it may lead into the hypospadiasis, condition called as hypospadiasis, where the urethral opening will be present in the ventral aspect of the penis. This aspect of the penis, if the urethral fold fails to fuse, while genital swellings which are there on the sides, it enlarges to contribute into the scrotal sac, and the septum in the midline divides this scrotal sac, scrotum into the two different sacs. So thus you will find the urethral opening is continued into the exterior as the opening outside through the ectodermal ingressed cells, which gets cannulated later on. So thus the genital tubercle, which was this initially, has contributed into penis in the male, while urethral folds has been fused together to form a median raphe, and genital swellings on the sides, they will contribute into the scrotum in the males. Let us see what happens to females. In absence of SRYG, this genital tubercle, it ingresses to form a clitoris, while the urethral fold, it remains and it does not fuse here, but this urethral fold will be now called as labia minora, and genital swelling will be called as labia majora. And inside this, in this urogenital groove, it opens into the vestibule of the vagina, where you will find the openings of urethra as well as the vagina. So that's the fate of those three major swellings, which develops into the male as well as female genitalia. So differentiation of this male or female genitalia happens at around third month of the development of the fetus, intrauterine life of the fetus. So let us have the various sex differentiation which is happening. So the chromosomal sex could be differentiated just after the fertilization, where the Y chromosome determines the sex of that individual. This Y chromosome will be having the SRY gene, which is located in the short arm of the Y chromosomes, and it stimulates the sertolin to secrete AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, and the Leydig cells to secrete testosterone, dihydrotestosterone, and it stimulates the genital ridge to produce the gonads, either testis or the ovaries. So SRY stimulates genital ridge to produce the testis. So this differentiation happens at around seventh week of the development, intrauterine life. And the phenotypically differentiation is happening at around third month when this dihydrotestosterone develops the genitals, the male external genitalia. Now let us have a look. So that's all about the development of the gonads, duct system, and the genitalia. And let us have a look over the developmental anomalies. Undescended testis, also called as cryptorchidism. In this, the testis fails to descend into the scrotum. It means that it has been in either of the tract of the descent. It could be in the abdomen, groin canal, or in the upper part of the scrotal region. So what is ectopic testis? Ectopic testis is, even here, the testis fail to descend into the scrotum, but the position of the testis could be somewhere away from the normal descent path of the testis. So this is the photograph which shows you clearly understand what the cryptorchid is in and what the ectopic testis is. Generally, the testis descends from the abdomen through the inguinal canal into the scrotum. If it is anywhere in this path or it has failed to descend here, then it will be called as undescended testis or cryptorchidism. In the term baby, in a full term baby, generally this does not happen. That in the preterm baby, there is more chance that the testis will be somewhere in the abdomen, which descends subsequently around third to 6 months of fetal life. If again it fails to descend after the 6 months, then surgically it could be treated to bring the testis back into the scrotum. This is the part of the ectopic testis. It is somewhere away from the normal routine part. You can see this being the inguinal canal, deep inguinal ring, superficial inguinal ring, and somewhere away. So it could be in a superficial uh, inguinal pouch or in the femoral canal, in the prepenile region. It could be in that away from the track of the normal routine descent. That's the ectopic testis. Few more anomalies is concerned with the development of the uterus as the two paramesonephric duct is uniting and fusing to form a uterus. And you are aware that two tubes with the single uterus, this is the normal one, the uterus, cervix, and the vagina is there. Sometimes it happens that two tubes they fuse only at its lower end, they fail to fuse completely. So that will lead into a diadelphys. The two, it will into two uterus, two cervix, and the two vagina, diadelphys. It could be in these two forms, where there will be one vagina, two cervix, and the two uterus, which is seen in this, or there could be two vagina, two cervix, and this. So both this could be happen when the two paramesonephric ducts they are independently stimulating the urogenital sinus to form the separate sinovaginal bulb to forming this diadelphy. This arcuate one, here there is a convexity seen in the fundic region, which means that the septa, which is formed by the fusion of two paramesonephric duct, has remained for a smaller extent in this cranial part of this fusion, leading to this arcuate type of the anomaly. Unicornuate means single horn. This is possible when the only single paramesonephric duct is contributing into the formation of the uterus, the another getting degenerated. Bipartite uterus is possible when the two ends they come together towards the urogenital sinuses. So there is a single cervix, single vagina, but two uterine canal and the two fallopian tube. It means it looks like two horns. And septate uterus. Septate uterus is possible when the two paramesonephric duct which has fused, but the septa between them has failed to degenerate. So these are the different anomalies which are possible by the in the process of the development of uterus. In short about this development of urogenital tract. Now further I would like to show you a video which explains the development of uh, the urogenital tract. Let us have a look over this. So initially, let us have a look at how the gonads are formed from the genital ridge. These are the differentiating cells from the yolk sac, which starts migrating from the dorsal mesogastrium to the region where the genital ridge is. So genital ridge, you can see it is present in the middle two-fourth of the medial two-fourth of this urogenital ridge. In this You can say as a medial to fourth of the length of this urogenital ridge, where the cells migrate. If you take the section at this point, it looks like this, where the cells, they are now started migrating from the dorsal wall to the genital ridge. Now let me orient you again. This in total is urogenital ridge, and this is the genital ridge, where the cells are proliferating from the coelomic epithelium to form sex cords, and the germ cells, they are getting incorporated inside the sex cords. Now this is a indefinite stage. SRY gene is responsible for the formation of this genital ridge into the testis. Let us see what happens. So the SRY gene, as I said, which is present in the Y chromosome, it stimulates the sex cords and they start separating from the surface epithelium. We'll see subsequently. They start separating from the surface epithelium shown already here, and they form the sex cords. And in the medulla, they will form the rete cords. Thus, the mesenchymal cells which have been incorporated inside here, they will form the and the tunica albuginea, while the sex cords, this, they will form seminiferous tubules, which gets later on. And you know this, the germ cells which is shown with this paper, they have started incorporated inside, and they will now differentiate into Sertoli cells, Leydig cells, and so on. So you will see in one of the section what has happened. Now you will see there are the Sertoli cells, the germinal cells here, and the Leydig cells. Simultaneously, the mesonephric tubules and the duct system changes, while the paranephric duct regresses. And this mesonephric tubules will form efferent ductules. Mesonephric duct will form epididymis, vas deferens, ejaculatory duct. Let us see what changes are happening in the ovary. In the cortex of this urogenital ridge, the cells they get separated, while the rete ovarian cells they get degenerated, while mesonephric duct system they get degenerated. And this sex cords they get separated to form ovarian follicles, which looks like this, which has called as now primordial ovarian follicle. The mesonephric duct degenerates, and the paramesonephric duct take into the action to form the female reproductive tract. Let us see what are the changes happening in meso and paramesonephric duct. Here you can see there is the genital ridge, and this is urogenital ridge, and this being the mesonephric duct, blue colored one, and this being the paramesonephric duct, and this is ureteric bud and the developing kidney. So when this and this being the hindgut part, and this being the urogenital sinuses, and here you can see what changes are happening in this. Those paramesonephric duct has been fused to form uterovaginal canal and is opening into urogenital sinuses. Let's see first what happens to the mesonephric duct, focusing here. So the mesonephric duct has now changed into different tubules and the duct system forming the vas deferens and ejaculatory duct, while paramesonephric duct has degenerated. That means when the descent of the testis happens, it gets its position where the mesonephric duct is seen hanging on the sides of the uterus. A male accessory sex glands like prostate, Bartholin's, the bulbourethral glands, seminal vesicles, they are formed subsequently in the urogenital sinus, the prosthetic part of the urethra. The cells they proliferate around the outer cortex, the outer part of this prostate, is formed from the urogenital sinus, while the absorbed part of mesonephric duct will contribute into the inner part of this prostate, while the protrusion or the bulb which is coming out will form bulbourethral gland from this urogenital sinus, and the protrusion coming out from this ejaculatory duct will contribute into the seminal vesicles. Formation of female reproductive tract is by, like, the mesonephric duct, it gets degenerated, and the section here, it represents that uterus is present in the intermediate one, this being the ovaries here, and this being the developing bladder, and this being a rectum. So this is the rectouterine pouch, and this is the ossicouterine pouch. This is the adult stage where you can see that uterus is forming in between this rectum and developing bladder. So the fusion of this, so, they have in the urorectal septum. You can see the two paramesonephric duct which is fused caudally, they form uterovaginal canal. Subsequent changes could be shown here, that the this will form fimbriae, fallopian tube. The free end will form the fallopian tube. Fused end will form uterus, cervix, and it states sinovaginal bulb formation from the urogenital sinus, and then it gets cannulated. And when this getting cannulated, it will form this definitive systems: uterus, cervix, vagina, and the vestibule of the urogenital sinuses. Lead into these two definitive positions, where cranially on the single cavity, but caudally two cavities are produced by the presence of uterus in between. The, now let us have a look how the genitals are formed. So this free elevation happens in the region of the urogenital membrane. Two folds on the sides called as urogenital folds, and the largest swelling on the sides called as genital swelling, and a single tubercle in the middle called as genital tubercle. This is indefinite stage in the fourth week where they start growing. Like when there's growing, this will form the phallus, genital tubercle, and the urogenital membrane, urogenital fold in males starts fusing to form a median raphe, while the swellings on the sides, they will contribute into the scrotum. Subsequently, the formation of the urethra happens, the penile urethra happens. If you take a section here in the glans, that's the ectodermal changes is happening. And when you take the sections in this, in the region of shaft, we'll find the urethral plate will form a urethral groove further, and there happens the fusion of this urethral fold to accommodate inside the spongy urethra. So throughout, this changes is happening, like the urethral plate, groove, folds, and the spongy urethra throughout the shaft. But in the region of the glans, the urethra is formed from the ectoderm by the increasing of the cells inside, but they are not cannulated. And let us see what changes are happening in the ectodermal part of this urethra, which is right here. Let us take the section of this vertical section. The spongy urethra, which is formed in the definitive stage here. To understand the ectodermal cannulation, let us have a look over the changes which are happening in the penile urethra. So the vertical section at this area will show you that the spongy urethra, which is formed inside the shaft, will start approached by this ectodermal outgrowth. Simultaneously, the prepuce is formed by the bilaminar growth of the ectodermal cells here. So this lead into the definitive urethral opening outside, and the cannula from this one urethra opens into this navicular fossa, will forming a definitely urethra. So this is how the ectoderm has contributed into the urethra. In female, the genital tubercle it regresses while urethral fold persists as a labia minora, and this forms genital swellings, forms labia majora outside. So this is the definitive part where the urethral orifice and the vaginal orifice happens to be in the vestibule. The gonads which are found in the abdomen has to descend into the scrotum. So the test is when it is descending, there are different factors. One is the gubernaculum, the another is the differential growth of the abdominal wall with the increasing of this peritoneal canal forming the processus vaginalis will form inguinal bursa and the passage of testis through this inguinal canal. The gubernaculum acts as a guiding force for the testis to descend, and the inguinal bursa, which forming processus vaginalis, will later on get obliterated to form the tunica vaginalis, para and the visceral layer of the testis. When the paramesonephric duct is fusing to form the uterus here, the free end is forming a fallopian tube, while the ovaries they are held in the position by macula will be now called as ligament of ovary till the angle of uterus. The remaining part will be called as round ligament of uterus, while this left part is suspensory ligament. So that's all about this topic.